This week's Parsha is Parsha Kedoshim. We'll be focusing on the first two psukim, and we'll also be focusing in on a dvar Torah I heard from Rabbi Gershenfeld. He's the one who brings this idea out. It's a popular idea, but the specifics will come from him. So here we go. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor, daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael v'amarta aleihem, Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for holy am I, Hashem, your God." And Rashi comments, we saw this comment of Rashi last week, but we'll go through it again. So, Kedoshim to you, tavu prushim min ha'arayot min ha'avera. Shekol makom she'ata motza geder erva, ata motza kedusha. Right? You should be removed from illicit relationships and from any sins that involve illicit relationships, because any place that you find, or in every place that you find a fence around erva, around illicit relationships, you find kedusha. And then he gives us examples. And Ramban, Nachmanides, in his commentary to Chumash, quotes Rashi. He says, this is Rashi's commentary on Kedoshim to you. But Ramban says, but I think it goes further than that. I don't agree with Rashi. I think it's something even further. The pasuk is going even further than that. And how does he mean? He says, "Aval b'Torah Kohanim ra'iti stam prushim to you." So he quotes a midrash that says, look, in the Torah Kohanim, it translates Kedoshim to you as prushim to you, just you shall be removed. Full stop. That's it. No, you shall be removed from the arayot and from the afera. It doesn't go as far. It just says you shall be removed. Removed from what? So Ramban continues to say, it means prushim in every way that the Gemara, the Talmud talks about in general. Now, what does that mean? So there are certain types of things that are permitted for people to do, but that these prushim, these special holy people, would refrain from even those permitted to them. So, for example, we can't go through every detail, but generally, there's a concept of tuma and tahara, right? A person goes into a cemetery is tama, and that's why we wash our hands before we go. That's the idea behind going to the mikvah. That's the idea behind washing our hands before we eat bread, and particularly before we actually dip the karpas into salt water on Seder night. Those are just general references. We can't go into detail, but that's the idea of when you're making yourself go from tama to being in a state of tahara, at least for your hands or your body if you're going to the mikvah. Okay, so how does that relate to this? So one of the examples in the Gemara of being of the prushim is that there is a certain type of food that you'd have to be in a state of kedusha for. For example, if you're going to eat kachim, if you eat any type of sacrifice, then you obviously need to be in a certain elevated state. And as a result, you have to go to the mikvah before, or wash your hands, whatever it was. That's what you have to do. What if you eat just regular food, right? Nothing. There's no particular status it has. It's just regular food that you eat on a daily basis. So in that case, you don't have to be in a state of tahara. You could be in a state of tuma, and that's fine, and you're allowed to eat. But these prushim, what they do, they say no. They eat even their chulin, even their just regular, ordinary food, even that they'd eat b'tahara. Because they're prushim, even though it was permitted to do so b'tuma, they wouldn't do that. They'd want to be tahor. Fine. And so Ramban says, we see that this prushim to you, it takes this concept of even that which is permitted to you, that you need to refrain from it. So what does this kedoshim to you mean? So says Ramban, amazingly, says, look, there are some things that the Torah has forbidden to us. There are certain relationships that are forbidden. There are certain types of food that are forbidden. Ramban doesn't say this, but he shows later on, when we see the opposite, there are also certain types of speech which are forbidden. And then there are things that are permitted. A husband's allowed to sleep with his wife, right? Allowed to have relations. What's it called? People are allowed to have wine, and they're allowed to eat meat, and they're allowed to do all those things. There are certain type of speech that they're allowed to engage in, or that the Torah doesn't forbid explicitly. And yet, says Ramban, accordingly, the sensual man could find room within the law to be steeped in the carnality of his wife or his many wives. Right? From the Torah, a man could marry many wives, and to be among the guzzlers of wine, among the gorgers of meat for themselves, and to speak as he pleases about all the vile things, for the prohibition of such speech is not explicitly mentioned in the Torah. Says Rashi, at least with some of the Art Scrolls fill-ins. And now comes Ramban's arguably most famous statement in his commentary on Chumash, Vehine hi naval b'rshuta Torah. And lo and behold, he will be a degenerate within the parameters of what is permitted by the Torah. Why is that? Because the Torah doesn't explicitly forbid what he's doing. And yet, you look at this person and you just you see him, and is he doing anything halachically wrong? Can you point out anything in the Shulchan Aruch that he's not doing correctly? And the answer is no. Everything he's doing is totally fine, 100% within the halacha. But he's a novel, he's a degenerate, a lowlife. And how is that possible? So says Rabbi Gershenfeld, says, really, this is an amazing idea. And it's important to understand that if you do something that makes you unholy, then you're in contradiction of this Kedoshim to you. Even if you're not violating a specific halachic precept, this is, in a way, the 614th commandment. You have the 613 commandments. These are the way a person's supposed to live, but it's supposed to elevate you and make you a certain type of person. It's supposed to bring you to a state of holiness. But there's some people who can do all 613. I mean, we're speaking loosely. And even so, they're still a naval. They're a lowlife, a degenerate. And says Rabbi Gershenfeld, what's a naval? What does that word come from? So we have this other word, a nevela, right? Now it's important to be specifically accurate about what different types of non-kosher meat is. That is to say, if someone says shechts an animal correctly, properly, everything is done correctly, then they check the lungs as you're supposed to do, be it like an animal or poultry, whichever, and you check their lungs, and things aren't as they're supposed to be. So the animal is treif, right? It's not kosher. Why? Because that is a treifa that they have found. What happens if you don't check the animal correctly? If there's a nick in your knife, or you don't, whatever, things go improperly, it's roadkill, whichever, that animal is called a nevela, right? The animal, we would say colloquially, is treif. It's not kosher. But that is not specific and accurate language. Really, it's a nevela. It's not kosher, that's correct, but the reason why is not because it has a treifa, but because it's a nevela. So what's a nevela? A nevela is an animal that if you were to take a live animal and a nevela, they look exactly the same. Every cell is there. The only difference is one's alive and one's dead. And therefore, a person who's a naval b'shut Torah, look, is every cell there? Is everything correct in terms of if you're to look at him? Is he doing everything according to the halacha? The answer is yes. He's doing everything that he's supposed to be doing, and yet he's still a lowlife. It's lifeless. His Torah means nothing because he's not imbued with the sense of Kedoshim to you. That's what Rabbi Gershenfeld wants to say, and that is such a critical idea, that there's a mitzvah gedola to do all of these things that you're permitted to do, but there's a way of kind of going beyond what the Torah wants us to do and in terms of what we want to do, and in that way we can be a naval b'shut Torah. That is the warning of Kedoshim to you, even when you're looking at the specifics of a mitzvah and even the Torah as a whole in terms of what we're supposed to be doing. There's the kind of extra step that we're supposed to take, and that is an important precept. That is what Kedoshim to you means, and we'll stop there. Shabbat Shalom.